Guys, Makeup Beauty, making a shirt for my kid to wear for tomorrow pre-K graduation. So she is size, let's see, she's 5 years old. She's on a bigger kid size. So I typically get her the Gildan shirt from Michael's, and I get her the extra small. They're a little bit loose, but then it kind of available to her as she grows. Because it's cotton and I tend to just dry wash everything, it'll end up like shrinking over time anyway, so this ends up being a very good choice. But I wanted to show you how I start to measure my project before I go into the design space to work with it. So I'm going to be using two holographic vinyl colors. I'm going to do the purple that she likes and the gold that Mama likes. And this is how I measure the shirt first, right? I know that I want my design to come down about like 3 inches. So here's I don't count the 3 inches from here, but I sort of like start to count from here, right? So like I know that I need my design to start going across right about here. There's quite a bit of eyeing it on my part, right? And it's I mean, I'm not doing this professionally. I'm doing it for my kids and my friends, and so I'm perfectly okay with a little bit of imperfection. But any case, so I want my design to probably, let me see if you guys can see it. Yeah, like that's pretty good, right? So probably go from here to like roughly the same amount. So that gives me almost 10 inches, give or take. I'll remeasure everything once I put the video down, but right now with me trying to record the video, it's a little bit different. So I think, that I wanted 10 inches, maybe a little bit smaller. Maybe I'll do the 9 inches, but, and then, like coming down this way, I probably wanted to come down right about here. So maybe 9 by 6. So that's kind of how I the design. Also, sometimes what I will do, I'll grab one of her t-shirts and I'll just put it right next to it, right? And I'll just measure it and I'll see where the width and length and how low, how high does it go. Okay, now on to adjusting the design in the design space before I send it off to my maker. Okay, so let's work on the project to do the actual cut. So I'm going to pull in my design into my space. And once I have it, I grabbed the wrong file. The file came as a flat file, which is when you look on my right-hand side of the panel, you can see that it's just one single cut, which is not what I want. I want the one where it is divided out. So I'm going to guess that this must be it. And yep, this is the one that I want. So I want to do the quarantine as its own separate color, but I want the rest of it to be printed out in the purple color. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to ungroup it, and I'm going to group this entire part, and I'm going to say actually attach. The reason I say attach is because I need this whole piece to cut as its own one thing. I don't want to have to position any parts myself, right? So once I do it attach, it's going to cut exactly as it's spaced out on my screen, and I'm going to group this whole thing together. Now the group is not the same as attach, right? Attach turns it into one single flat file. A group is just groups it together, but it still sees it as two separate components. But the reason I'm grouping it together is because I want to adjust my sizing. And as I said, I want to have about 9 inches going through my width, right? And I've calculated to do 7 inches on my height. So I'm going to open this proportions and I'm going to adjust my settings manually. So I'm putting in 9 here. and 7 here. So because I grouped this together, everything gets sized up correctly at once. Whereas if I just sized everything up to quarantine on its own, then I would have much harder time to figure out how to size up the quarantine to match the rest of the design. So I'm going to close it. Now, because I'm not attaching anymore, right, and I'm just using the grouping, I can even leave it as is, and I'm going to say that I want to make it. And you can see that I can actually move this on its own. But as I did this, I realized that my vinyl is actually in almost, what is it? I think it's like 18 inches. And the second piece is a little bit less for quarantine, but I don't want to have to use my 24-inch mat. So I'm just going to cancel this out. And I'm going to ungroup this now, and I'm going to be putting quarantine in a separate color. The reason to that is because I plan to use 2 mats today. So I'm going to put this in red, and it really doesn't matter what color you put it in design space, right? Because the color in design space doesn't translate into the direct color on the physical mat that you're going to be using it. This is just more for helping you to see your project if you're working with a whole bunch of different colors, to help you to see how it all comes together. But you know, I mean, I'm going to be cutting this on purple, and the quarantine is going to go on gold. So now that I have my 2 separate colors, which end up in 2 separate mats, I'm going to make it now. And here I have it in my mats, right? It's automatically adjusted how it's going to position. Everything looks great. I do need to mirror my images because I will be using holographic HTV, and that one requires that I adjust, that I mirror it. And now I'm going to click on my continue. And you know what? I realized that I don't have my maker on. So I'm going to grab my maker and have it turned on and have the Bluetooth do its magic. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but my maker's waking up. So hopefully it's not going to take too long to wake up. Okay, and I'm going to browse materials, and I'm going to type in holographic. And it is, I don't know why, oh, I do know why actually. Okay, so if you were to use the holographic iron-on by the Cricut brand, right, then you would be selecting this. I'm not using Cricut brand. I'm using holographic heat transfer by another brand. I don't remember the name of it, but that's the one that I'm going to be using. So I'm going to click on done. And actually the system gives me an error, message and reminder to remind me that I need to do the iron on and that I need to put my shiny side down. So you know, I tend to save all of the directions for all the products that I buy because I know that each one of them is very specific. But thankfully, the software has also been updated where it will call it out for you what you need to do. So make sure you don't fly through the screen, but you know, do pay attention to what the software is trying to communicate to you. The default pressure is quite fine. If I was working with, let's say, glitter HTV, which I do have, and I was thinking to use it first, but I decided to go with holographic, I would have changed the pressure and I would have set it to more. The reason to that is because the glitter HTV tends to be a little bit chunkier. So if you put more pressure, it's a guarantee that it's going to cut it through for you. I'm going to put it on default, and next, I just have to put my project through and have it cut out. So before I weed my vinyl, right, I do cut it. The reason to that is because, first of all, it just makes it so much easier for me to see what I'm weeding, but also because I don't like to waste my vinyl. And so, you know, here's my Cricut cutter, and I just cut it save it. Used to have a binder actually for all of different extras that I had, but now I just have this one big bin, and I just stick all of them in there. So I'm cutting my HTV right now, and as you see, the shiny side is down. Let me grab it and just show you the color. This is what is going to be for the larger part of the design, and the quarantine is going to be in a smaller gold color. And if you guys notice, I did not use the fast mode. The reason to that is because you know, it's got a lot of small details, and if you do the fast mode, it will lift your vinyl most likely, and so I prefer not to do it on the intricate cut. So I have an admission to make, guys. After all the talk about, you know, doing the mirroring and following the direction of the product, well, lo and behold, I forgot to mirror one part. I did not mirror my hashtag quarantine. So good thing that I have some extra vinyl. I'm gonna have to reprint this part again, and I'm gonna show you how I'm going to reprint this without actually having to, you know, go back to the project and canceling anything out. So I'm gonna grab my mat. Here's my mat. Here's my vinyl. So I'm gonna be so I'm gonna position it out this way. So it's not gonna be a bit of a perfect fit because I'm trying to make a video at the same time as I'm positioning it. Okay, so here I have my vinyl, right? The shiny side down. And I'm gonna come in here, and what I'm gonna do is I'm going to, let's see, make sure. So okay, so if you have sorry, I apologize, guys. Okay, so I already printed my cut, right? I can click when I finish here, and it will kick me back, and I can certainly hide this just part and have only this one printed. But I honestly don't need to get out of the screen at all. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to select this, and notice how the color changes, right? So the selection is now on number 2, not on a number 1. So I have my mirror on, and I'm just going to load up my maker. It did not load up very well because I'm holding it with one hand and holding the video with the other hand. So I'm gonna, okay, now load it up much better. I have it on mirrored on. I have my default. It's still keeping on my holographic, and this time I do have my mirror on. You guys can see it right there, and my number 2 is my selection. So I'm gonna press on the Cricut, and off it goes. I'm cutting my quarantine hashtag that is mirrored this time. I wanted to talk to you about how, you know, like some of the tips and tricks on when you weed. So holographic in general tends to weed pretty well, but you know how like sometimes you have a large design, right? And say, let's pretend that this is permanent, and it's pulling from like all different directions, right? Like I'm pulling it from here while I'm also pulling it from the bottom on and there. So if I was working with a permanent, what I would do, I would use my scissors, and I would actually just start cutting it out in several places just to make sure that I'm not trying to pull all of the excess vinyl all at once. Because what would happen with a permanent is, you know, with all the stickiness, if something goes back back on the design, then it get stickiness all over, and then just becomes so much harder to work, and you could accidentally end up, you know, lifting your entire design. So that's what I would do. I would actually, as soon as I see that it's lifting in more than several places at once, I would cut this part off, I would cut this part off, this part, you know, I'd continue to clean up from here, and then slowly get on the other side. And I would just continue to cut things off as I weed to make sure that I don't have this mess right here, which is, again, right, okay with holographic, but it would not be okay with... One thing with detailed designs, right, is that you have to be very careful when you weed to make sure that you're catching everything. So what I do is, like, I literally I'll be weeding, right, and then I'll bring it and do it side by side. So I, for example, just saw that my K is still missing. Like I did not weed one part on the bottom, like you guys can see it right here. And so before I do the before I press it, I'm just gonna, you know, carefully go over and make sure that it's all off. And also you have to be very careful to make sure that all your small pieces that don't belong there, like for example that piece right there, right, is removed from your transfer sheet, because otherwise it's gonna get glued on as well, and then it just becomes such a pain to remove them. And when they're such small pieces, you know, it's a disaster to get them off. So just be mindful about that when you work with the detailed stuff. Everything weeded out and I'm getting ready to press. I'll be using my easy press because I'm on my dining room table. So I'm actually not going to do it on my dining room table. I'm going to do it on my counter. The holographic takes 320 degrees, but actually this specific brand takes 320. So you should always check and see what the recommendations are for doing your design. But before I start positioning everything, what I'm going to do is I'm going to iron everything out. This is even way before I'm ready to start putting stuff on, right? Just so that to get all the wrinkles out, and it gives me a little bit better view on the size of it, and it will help me with my positioning. Then I will position everything. I will do this separately only because there's a lot of transfer tape and I, you know, don't want it accidentally bump with each other. And then I'm gonna press, and I think it's gonna look amazing. I have my ruler and I'm gonna maybe measuring you know, my distance from side to side, just to be on a safe side, to make sure that it is truly even. And I have my parchment paper. I use this instead of the Teflon sheet, although I do have Teflon sheets as well. And make sure that if you're using parchment paper, do not confuse it with wax paper, because the wax paper will destroy everything. It should really truly be parchment paper. And once I have my design, you know, laid out exactly how I want it, I'm gonna start pressing. Typically I actually would put it on a lower table just so that I can use my body weight to like press it down even harder, but it's busy with other things, so I'm just gonna have to sort of like lean on with my upper body and put the pressure. I'm pretty tall, I'm almost 5'7", so I can just, you know, hover over. But if you're somebody short, consider like maybe getting a step stool, so it will give you that additional height, so that when you're pressing, right, like you can really use your body to sort of give it that additional pressure. That's the pro and con of a having heat press versus an easy press, because with a heat press, right, you don't really need to worry about any of the adding on additional pressure, because it would already do it for you. So here we go, guys. I'm pressing down on my design, which is a little bit tricky because I have it pressing and recording the video. Because I have a small press, it's not going to cover everything. I'm going to move her over and I'm going to start on a second part as well, and then I'm gonna see whether or not it took, and if it didn't, that's okay. I'm just gonna repress it again, and we'll see how it goes. So I'm almost there. Holographic is the cold press, right? So I have to wait for the liner to cool off before I start pulling it off. So I'm just gonna, it's still pretty hot to the touch, also starting to cooling down, and then I'm gonna start to slowly lift and see whether or not it took, and see, you know, whether it's laying nicely. And like I said, right, if the vinyl started to lift up, then I would just repress it. It's looking pretty good. My kid loves the shirts made out of this, so I'm gonna have to stop making video for a second because I need to lift this up, and it's a little tricky to do it with just one hand. Here you guys have it, the benefit of having a crafty mama. She's gonna make you an amazing shirt, even in during pandemic times. We have pre-K graduate class of 2020 #quarantine, and I'm gonna finish off with we want vaccine now.